podcast
Maybe.
function.
It did function.
I rolled a 19, so.
Alright, so today, because of the fact that we have the short story winter romance contest coming up, we are going to talk about different types of slash tropes in romance and how to write them well and how to write them bad. Not that you want to write them bad, but rather how to not do that. That's true. Unless you're doing it on purpose, you could be purposely being like, he's the wrong guy, and here's all the red flags. But unless you're trying to make them a walking red flag, don't do the things I said.
I can change him.
No,
you
not
can't.
that trope. Okay. Anyway. Okay, so first one is friends to lovers. Especially if you're doing this in a short story format, you want to start with them already friends. The reason why is because it's way easier. In a novel, it's way easier, but in a short story, it is literally essential. If you do not start with them friends and your friends to lovers for a short story, it's going to take entirely too long and you're going to run out of words or you're going to rush through things. And that's just, it's sad because it's got good potential, then it falls flat because you don't really feel the friendship. But if you start friends, then you can just have them already being like teasing of each other and like bumping each other and different things like that. And you're like, fluffy. And then you feel it, right? With not writing friends to lovers well, this is when, like I said, they don't start out friends. That actually makes it way harder. You can do it, but know that by the time they become friends, they're basically falling in love. At that point, it's not really friends to lovers, it's just falling in love. So, with friends to lovers, you also typically want to start with them being friends when they were younger, just because even though they can be friends when they're older and then fall in love, it's less likely. Most of the time, people just fall in love when they're older. It's more likely to be like, oh, we were best friends in 4th grade, now I have a crush on them and we're in high school, kind of thing. That's more common. Not that the other can't happen, but it just doesn't quite work as well writing-wise. It gets weird. All right, next thing, slow burn. First emphasis for the slow burn. You cannot do a slow burn in a short story. Impossible. The reason why is because slow burns typically take at least 200 pages, which you do not have in a short story.
A really long short story.
That's no longer a short story. That is a novella. It's called baby novella. But yes, if you want to do a short story and you want to do a slow burn, again, you have to re-establish this and be like, oh, I've been in love with her for years, but I've never gotten the chance to tell her. Then you can have it kind of be the slow burn. But even then, it doesn't quite hit the same as with a novel because you get to see the slow burn happening. For example, I just finished editing a novel. Not quite. I have 2 pages left, but 2 whole pages. A lot can happen in 2 pages. This guy likes to leave things on cliffhangers. Anyway, so I'm scared.
No.
But anyway, point being is that it started out with them just barely getting to know each other, and over this slow burn time, it feels like a slow burn. And the funny thing is with slow burn is that it's about how it feels to the reader, not necessarily how long it's actually been. Because actually, in this novel, it's only been like a month. That's not really a slow burn in real life, but it feels like it because it took a whole 400 pages for them to kiss. So you're like, it feels slow, even though the novel takes place over the course of a month. It's kind of one of those things that people don't realize in romance novels is that sometimes you lose track of time and how time and space works. For example, if you analyze Twilight basically they say they're in love and cannot be without each other after they've met 3 times over the course of 2 months. And we're all like, wait, you met, not even dated, met 3 times.
To describe Twilight.
Not that it's bad. It's more just the fact that because she's pining after him, it feels like it's been way longer. It feels like it's more developed. Especially because it is a very one-sided relationship at first, where he's all like, "I'm in love with you," but I can't be with you, and she's all like, "You're a random weirdo who seems hot." So you can do that too, where it's a slow burn only on one side, where the other person is totally unaware of their feelings, but the other person is like, "Bro, you are the one," and they're just not even aware they exist. You can do that. The other big thing with the slow burn is either, like I said, it has to take place over a long amount of pages, so it feels slow burnish, or alternatively, it has to take place over a long amount of time. Typically, I would say a minimum of a year. You cannot call it a slow burn romance. I will also say this: you cannot call it a slow burn romance if they are instantly attracted to them. Most of the time in a slow burn, they're like, oh, they're attractive, but they're not like they look like a goddess. Then you're like, okay, that's insta love. That is not.
Stalkerish.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's like those moments in romance movies where they walk in and the music is glowing and they have sparkles, and you're like,
Isn't that just a K-drama?
yeah, that's basically what I'm saying. So my point is, K dramas are very much into the instant love thing where they walk in and they're like, whoa. You don't want to do that in a slow burn. In a slow burn, you want to have them be like, oh, they're kind of cute, or oh, they're kind of funny, but then they don't really realize that they have real feelings until later, and they slowly start realizing how attractive they are. It's not that they weren't attractive before, it's just that they were like, oh, hey, we don't really know each other, so I'm like, they're cool and they're attractive, but they're not like insanely attractive yet because they haven't really gotten to know them. So keep in mind those are two different things. If you have them walk in and it's like a K drama with music and glitter and flowers and all that jazz, it's not a slow burn. Just know that. They can think, like I said, they can think they're attractive, but there's a difference between attractive and like you are the only person on the planet who I will be in love with from this exact second forward. Um, Not the same thing. All right. The reason I emphasize that so much is because there are lots of people who are like, this novel is a slow burn, and then I read it and I'm like, we have a lot of work to do. Just because they have this instant you're a goddess like reaction and then they fall in love within the span of a week. And I'm like, bro, not slow burn. So, next thing is, funnily enough, love at first sight. There's nothing wrong with this trope, but if you're going for slow burn, this ain't it. The other thing with that is that you can always do kind of the Frozen thing where it's like make fun of the trope and have them not actually be the person they're in love with. Or you can alternatively have it be that that is actually the person they're going to fall for. Oftentimes, though, a lot of K dramas actually get this right, where even if they find them super super attractive and are like, wow, you're a goddess at first sight, they will deny their feelings. Why? Because a lot of people don't like the idea of love at first sight. They're like, ew, I can't control this feeling. What is this? I don't like it. And so you don't have to have that reaction, but it is actually a very common reaction. Or alternatively, you can just have them be straight up like, I'm going to immediately flirt with you and then get rejected and then they're sad. So, typically, love at first sight does not go both ways. Just because of the fact that oftentimes that's just how relationships are. I don't know why that is, but typically one person is like love at first sight, and the other person is like they're cute, but I don't really know them, so until I get to know them. And so one is a slow burn and the other's love at first sight. But sometimes you can have them both feel that way. Oftentimes, though, that is more lust than it is love, just because of the fact that then you don't really know them as a person. You're just like, wow, they're attractive. Even with love at first sight romances, they'll often be like, wow, they're really attractive. I want to get to know them. They're not just like, wow, they're really attractive. Let's go date now. They're like, hey, what's your name? What's your favorite food? Different things like that. And then they go and go on a date and like figure things out and actually, don't just go crazy. But you can. Again, if you want to have a red flag, you can absolutely just have them be like, we're both in love at first sight, and we just immediately skip the steps of getting to know each other and just run off into the sunset. That is going to be problematic, even if you are in love at first sight. Like, for example, I 110% was definitely in love with my husband at first sight. I saw him and was like, I want to marry that man specifically. As long as he's a good person, I want to marry that man. And he was a great person, and he had an awesome, fun personality and spirit, and I was like, yes, and it was awesome. But at the same time, it was not the same way for him. He thought I was very attractive, but he was very much more of a slow burn. We were more of a friends to lovers. He thought we were literally just friends, and the whole time I was hitting on him. But so you can very much have where someone is just not getting the cues, and the other person is like, I want that person specifically. It happens. So next thing, enemies to lovers. Now, when we say enemies to lovers, there are two different ways you can do this. One, toxic. This is where they are genuinely enemies. They murdered their whole family, and for some reason, they're in love with them anyway.
Drama.
Yeah. Um, Not that this can't happen. It can happen, unfortunately. There are some crazy people. They're even called jail bunnies, where they fall in love with people who have been in jail their whole lives and date them and even marry them sometimes. It's no offense to people who are out there doing that, but you're crazy. Like, but also you need help. Um, um, they will literally fall in love with like serial killers and stuff like that, and I'm like, I don't know how you can. But anyway, so it's not that it can't happen. Just know that typically these people are a lot more fangirl types, where they're not actually in love. They're more in like, oh my gosh, you're so cool, kind of vibe. They're more preppy cheerleader kind of type. They're not typically like, I'm actually genuinely in love with this person, and if they are, they're typically a psycho themselves. So there's that for enemies to lovers. Most of the time, with your enemies to lovers novel or short story, especially with short stories, you want to have it be more of a rivalry, more rivals to lovers than enemies to lovers, because you are technically an enemy if you're rivals, but not quite as dastardly and crazy. It's more like, oh, well, we're both vying for the same internship at this fashion company, who's gonna win? And so you're like underhandedly, doing all sorts of things to each other in order to win, and then you realize that you actually like each other. That's a lot more realistic, a lot more normal, can happen more frequently. I know that there was one of my favorite enemies to lovers that I have read, um, actually, two of them. One was where they were engaged to each other because their kingdoms were like, hey, we want peace, and so you two have to be engaged. And so the reason they were enemies to lovers is because their kingdoms were at war. Not necessarily because they hated each other, but more just because they were like, because our kingdoms are at war, I don't like you, you don't like me. And it's not even because they don't like them actual selves, they just didn't like the fact that their countries were at war and therefore disliked them on default. um, that one was called Heirs of Secrets. It's a lot of fun. And then the other one that I really enjoyed is called Blooming Love. And I really liked that one because it was a lot more rivals to lovers, where he actually was not trying to cause problems. He was just doing his job. His job was to come in and acquire land for this big fat company. Her job was to try and advocate for small businesses. Those counter each other. And so even though they liked each other, they were cross purposes job wise. It wasn't that they disliked each other. They actually were good friends, but they were very much did not like what the other person was doing with regards to their job. And so he ends up quitting his job, and it's adorable. But anyway, um, so moving on. Next one. Falling in love with someone that is evil. Similar to enemies to lovers, but not quite the same. This is more falling in love with the actual villain. You can do one of two things. You can go the Zuko route, where they get redemption, and then you're like, sweet, I fell in love with them, and I could see that they had the potential to change, but they still changed on their own. Emphasis on this. If you're going to do the whole I can change them thing, it needs to be more I can support them to change themselves, because you cannot change someone. We need to change that. That trope should not be a thing. It's toxic and unhealthy. Yes.
The only time that I've seen it kind of work is in my little honey with Fluttershy. I'm sorry.
But again, no, seriously though, then they're still changing themselves. They're just supporting them to change. And so I think we need to change this narrative of you can change them to you can support them to change if they want to. They still have to want to change. Exactly. I think that's a great example because they still had to want to change themselves, and they just supported each other and were wholesome and fluffy. So, yes, supporting each other through change is a great romance dynamic. It's awesome. It's a good thing. It's what couples should do. But anyway, moving back to loving someone who's evil. Or you can alternatively have them be like evil in quotation marks. This is kind of the example of they're a serial killer who only kills serial killers kind of thing. And then it's like, oh, I love you because even though you are killing people, you're only killing bad people kind of thing. It's kind of that interesting gray morality thing. And then you have the last one where they're just full on psychotic, and you're like, how are you in love with a crazy psycho? But yeah, there's that.
Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Stockholm syndrome. Even though we're not actually going to talk about Stockholm syndrome,
Oh.
but we are going to talk about trauma bonding, which is what Stockholm syndrome is based on.
For
So,
those of you.
um, this is actually really fascinating. Because of the fact that I actually thought it was really great they addressed this in Stranger Things, is the fact that the spoilers for season 5, certain characters don't actually end up together. Um, but with that being said, the reason I liked that they didn't end up together was not necessarily because I did or didn't like the couple. It was because the couple was identifying this is us bonding through trauma, and we need to go figure out our own lives before we determine if we're gonna come back to this, and that is very healthy. However, that's not what everyone does. And it's not bad to be with someone while they are traumatized or going through something traumatic. That is very healthy and good. But you should have had a relationship before that. If you develop a relationship during trauma, that can cause a lot of problems. um, this is often why I thought it was nice that a lot of young adult novels have been addressing this more now. And instead of just being like, oh, we've gone on all these adventures and nearly died 5,000 times, let's get married. And I'm like, no, 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 figure out who you are when you're not dying. Because trauma bonding is very much a thing. When you support each other through something very traumatic and intense, it naturally bonds you more because you're there for each other and you're supporting each other. And can be a wonderful, beautiful thing. But you gotta be careful that you're not just like, I'm in love, and in reality, what's happening is you just feel highly supported by this wonderful person who was with you during trauma. Um, so just make sure that your characters, if they are trauma bonding, um, that you realize that's what's happening. You as an author, even if the audience is like, "Woo, I ship them," you as an author know, like, "Hey, they got to figure their crap out after this." But you can absolutely do that if you want to for your romance novel, or your romance short story. If you want to have like a romance short story where during the holiday they get kidnapped by some cult and have to escape or something, and they trauma bond through that, and then are like, let's go date after this, and they're like, sure, and that's adorable and fluffy, sure. um, that's great. um, just keep in mind that if you're going to do it long term in a novel, you need to address these kinds of things. All right. Next thing, falling for someone who abuses you. I want to address this because even though I don't want to encourage this, it can happen. Unfortunately, it is messed up. It is sad, but it can happen. So with that being said, um, oftentimes this is because abusers are on their best behavior before they are in a committed relationship. So as a result, they will be the best person on the planet right before they get in a committed relationship because they want to lure you into having a committed relationship. But there will often be a lot of red flags. They'll do something super, super mean to you, and then they'll buy you $5,000 worth of gifts, and then you feel like, oh, they love me, and it's like, no, they're just desperately trying to get you to not remember what they just did to you. And yes, is it fine if someone like buys you a gift or something to apologize after an argument? Yes. Is it fine for someone to punch you in the face and then buy you a $500 purse? No, that's not normal. Um, so just keep in mind. And then they will also tend to point out every single one of your flaws. This isn't just like a, oh dang, you missed that question on the test or something. It's like, you missed that question on the test, are you stupid? And it's like, whoa, no, I'm not stupid. And yet sometimes people will be so like wanting to please them that they're like, oh, maybe they're right, and they'll beat up on themselves. The other issue with falling for someone that abuses with you, aside from the obvious, is the fact that oftentimes this person already has trauma in this direction, and that's why they're falling for an abuser. Because unfortunately, there is a cycle. If you see that in your own home, or if you see that even through someone else, um, you may not even recognize the signs that are there because you're so familiar with that, unfortunately. Um, so if you have a character who falls in love with someone who abuses them, keep those things in mind. Yes, question.
Another thing that
Yeah.
they usually tend to do, well, this is the stuff I learned. I don't
Yeah.
know how I know this. I just I'm like,
Hey, we
oh,
all
I'm
learn
just
things
really.
from.
Is that they usually try to isolate them from their friends or
Yes,
family.
absolutely. Um, They absolutely try to isolate you, or even if they don't physically isolate you, they will emotionally isolate you, where they'll tell you, oh, your sister's a horrible person. Maybe your sister is a horrible person, but take that into actual account. Think about it. Are they a horrible person? If the answer is no, they are trying to isolate you. If your sister, however, is a horrible person, then okay, maybe take their advice. Like, think logically before you just accept whatever they're saying. Thank you. That's another good point. Um, just make sure to be aware with your characters. Um, all right, now, of course, we've got to talk about these topics because no romance novel is complete without some weird things going on. First of all, let's talk about obsession versus real love. Um, Obsession is oftentimes when people think someone is a certain way, but they don't actually know who they are. They actually haven't really gotten to know them, or they're obsessed with a part of them. So they maybe are starting to get to know them, but they only really like them because they're rebelling against their parents, or because they supposedly understand them better than anyone else, or something like that. They don't actually love them; they just love the idea of them. That can become more of an obsession, more of a problem. It was actually funny because I came across an article recently where it talked about the actor, funnily enough, for Twilight, being stalked by a girl. And he actually decided to take the approach of, I think you're in love with the idea of me and not actually me. So just to test it out, let's go on a date. They went on a date. He told her all about the real him, his anxieties, his life, his struggles, and she immediately was like, check, please, I need to leave. Because she was thinking he was this idealized person rather than who he actually was. She wasn't in love with him, she was in love with the idea of being with him. So keep that in mind with your characters. I've had quite a few people, unfortunately, where I've read their romance novels or short stories, and unfortunately, it's just straight up obsession. It's not love. It's just obsession. So just be aware of that. The best way to show that it's not obsession and that it's real love is to have them show their flaws and things like that, and have them love them anyway. So if they have a moment where they're like, "Hey, I'm super sorry. I super messed up," instead of having them be like, "Yeah, you messed up and I'm done with you." That would be obsession. Um, they're like, "You know what? What you did was not okay, but let's see if we can work through this," or something like that. That's going to be more real love, something that's going to last. Um, okay. Speaking of which, writing breakup scenes. Gasp. So, with writing breakup scenes, there's a good way to do it and a not so good way to do it. Good way to do it is to have it be some sort of either a legitimate reason, or you're illustrating just how much of a bad person they are and have it be a dumb reason. Um, if it's a good reason, it needs to be something like, we want to be together, but you want to stay here to do XYZ, and I want to go to a different state to study XYZ or whatever. That is a tragic reason to break up, but at the same time, it can happen where two people believe they're in love with each other, believe they're meant to be together, and then they cannot put aside their own personal goals long enough to stay. That's a legitimate reason to break up. Um, and it's the most frequent one, honestly, is just two people have very different goals. The other most frequent one is they're a jerk. And either the other person realizes they're a jerk and breaks it off, or the other person breaks it off because they are a jerk. And then you have the third reason, which is the false breakup, where they attempt to break up with someone just because they're scared of losing them, but they're not actually wanting to break up with them. Make sure that you don't mistake that for a real one, because a lot of, I've even seen this in other books, like, no offense, but Michael Bay did this, where he tried to break up with Taylor purely because he was scared of losing her. And instead of saying, instead of like talking about that afterwards, he was just basically like, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake." And I'm like, "No, talk about your feelings and the fact that you messed up." But anyway, so that one was hard because it didn't really feel like a real breakup. It felt forced because this whole time she'd been in danger and now he was breaking up with her. And I'm like, "Okay, so you didn't care about her being in danger until now? Why now?" And if you are going to have something like that, why now? Explain why now. Explain why they're scared now. It's like it's been 4 whole books of terror and mutiny and craziness and murder, and now you're scared? Like, why are you scared now? What is terrifying you so much worse now? And I think if Richard Evans had done a little bit of a better job explaining why he was scared now when he was not scared before, I would have been totally on board with it. But he did not explain it. He basically was just like, "Oh, he's scared," and I'm like, "And he wasn't scared the other 4 years because why?" It's been 4 years of this. We're only scared now. Okay, so um, make sure you explain why the breakup's happening. Or you can always just have them be a jerk and not really explain it very well because they're a jerk. Jerks exist in this world, unfortunately, who are very superficial and are like, a great example of this is Legally Blonde, um, where he's like, I want to become president one day, so and go to law school, and you're just, not law school and presidential wife material, and it's like, whoa, jerk. And then of course she goes to law school and kicks his butt. But anyway, and proves she is very much that kind of material. Um, so it's important that you illustrate what the reasons are, even if they are dumb reasons, because having a reason behind it is typically what makes a breakup so emotional. Even if it's a dumb reason, it still makes it way more emotional to have a dumb reason than it does to just be like, we're breaking up. And it's like, okay, why? If you're just breaking up for no reason, that doesn't really make sense. Okay. So, um, any questions regarding writing romance in short form slash in general? No questions. Cool. All right. A reminder that the contest is due on the last day that we are open, whatever day that is. I don't know if the 28th is on a Sunday or not. So, whatever day is the last day that we're open in February. So, whatever that is. Make sure that you get it turned in at least 15 minutes before we close. If you call and let me know that you're not going to be able to make it, or that you have to turn it in digitally because there's a family emergency or something, that's fine. Just make sure you call the library ahead of time so I'm aware that you tried to turn it in on time. That way I'm not just like, oh, they're just trying to sneak in a few more days of writing time. No, that's called cheating. And in that case, then I will turn the video off and we can just simply discuss writing stuff, or y'all can write on your own without discussing things if you wish to just have quiet writing.